Welcome to the latest episode of the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. My name is Hunter Baumgardt, your host. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. Feel free to like the Facebook page as well, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. Remember, you can watch or listen to the podcast. You can watch on YouTube or listen on SoundCloud. Simply search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. Well, we have another fun episode today, and today I am super excited for the guest. Super excited for Brian Anderson to join us. He is, of course, the play-by-play announcer for the Milwaukee Brewers on Fox Sports Wisconsin. He also does the MLB, the NBA, and college basketball for Turner Sports on TNT, TBS, and NBA TV. So we are going to talk to him about all of that, adjusting back into sports going on and how that's going to look, where he's going to be calling games from. Is he going to travel with the team? Is he going to go to the Orlando bubble and call the NBA playoffs? All of those questions will be answered on this podcast with Brian Anderson, and I'm super excited to talk to him and have you view that as well. So with no further ado, let's get to Brian Anderson. Joining us on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast this week is Brian Anderson. You recognize the voice and the face there. He is the play-by-play announcer for the Milwaukee Brewers, and you also see him on Turner Sports for the MLB, NBA, and college basketball. You can follow him on Twitter at BAndersonPXP. Brian, really appreciate the time today with sports ramping up, and specifically the NBA and MLB. I know you probably have a lot of work that you're starting to do again as your schedule gets busier, so I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, good to be here, man. This is good practice for me. Now I can actually speak into a microphone. We're actually going to be starting, I don't know when this will air, but we're starting Tuesday the 14th. We're going to be covering some of the Brewers inter-squad games, which we would never consider in any other scenario except the COVID-19 shutdown. So I think people are hungry to see what they can see. So we're going to be doing basically webcasts or radio calls with video accompaniment on all the Brewers digital channels. So that's breaking news for you here, Hunter. And
thank you. Yeah,
we're going to get that started. So all next week, we're going to have some games. We're going to televise an exhibition game. I believe those details aren't firmed up. And then that all leads to opening day on the 24th.
That's awesome. So I know yesterday they had a inter-squad game and they broadcast on Facebook. So is it basically just adding your calls to those Facebook? Okay.
Yeah, that was a bit of a test run just to see how everything would work. And, I think obviously fans were like, well, where's the sound? Where are the announcers?
Right.
Where's the audio? And that's been the plan the whole time, just to first drop some images. Because, Miller Park's been closed for a while. We figured everything would work, but we don't know that. So we had to get players on the field and get those cameras fired up. All of that runs through the scoreboard. There's, we still have to practice social distancing. That means a lot of the employees who normally work there can't work there. So training other personnel to not only run cameras, but work in the control room. So it's much bigger than just flipping on your laptop or your phone and watching, which we want to be able to do that for fans, but it takes a little time in this day and age to get to the point where we can bring you all this. So yeah, we showed you the video, then we'll start to add the audio, then we'll start to add the announcers, then we'll actually do a real television broadcast, and then obviously the season starts. So that's kind of our plan to make sure we're not fumbling all the way in and end up on Deadspin or end up of the ridicule of the podcasting world like yourself.
Exactly. No, I would never ridicule you. Excuse me. But yeah, so some in my throat there. So have you been to Miller Park yet, or are you going to be calling these games from home? Are you going to be still calling them in the booth? What have you guys been thinking about that?
Yeah, so I have been to Miller Park. We all went and got tested, basically an intake testing period that in order to work at Miller Park we had to do last week. So that part's been done. I haven't been, inside the booth or seen the field, but it's going to be a different scenario. We do have a really good plan protocol. So we're essentially, I don't know what the name is. So in the NBA, when I go into the Orlando bubble, there's specific names. Like I'll be in the yellow zone. I don't know if baseball, I'm sure they have a name, but either way, we're kind of like the tier 2. So the players would be tier 1. They have access to all of the service level, field level, everything that they would normally use. Now, we're not allowed down there. So They're trying to separate press, broadcasters, up to the second or third level, Lowe's level at Miller Park. So we're going to be broadcasting every game from Miller Park, home or road. So obviously home games we'll be able to see the action, which would be great. No fans, but at least we can see it. Baseball is the hardest sport to call off a monitor. So that's at least half the games we'll be able to see the action on the field, interact with rock. We'll have plexiglass between us and minimal crewing. So our normal booth complement with stats and stage manager and an A2, that's going to be probably just one person now, is where they're leaning. But so that's how that'll work. Now for Brewers road games, we'll also call it from Miller Park, and then we will set up basically a video wall complement in front of us that will be different than what we normally see. So normally I would have, see if you can see my hand. So normally I would have my program monitor to my left where this is what everybody at home sees. And then I would have what they call an ISO monitor to my right with this space in the middle where I can see the field.
Sure.
So what we'll do is we'll add a couple of monitors in the middle that will be individual feeds, like of our center field camera, individual feed of our robo camera that's on the net, what we call the home plate robo camera. So then at least I have a chance to see where the fielders are positioned, where where the pitcher, catcher, umpire, hitter are all lined up and set up. So that's going to be a challenge, and it'll be different, be very interesting. But that's our plan for now, is to do every game from Miller Park. We'll park our production truck in the outfield like we normally do, and in the South Dock, and that'll basically be our studio for the next 66 days.
Wow. Yeah, it's going to be so different, but it's just going to be, at least we have baseball, at least we can broadcast baseball. Like it's for sure better than nothing. And it's great that you get to be at least in the action for the home games. I was curious, you mentioned the Orlando bubble and you're talking about the yellow zone. So I know you usually do, NBA postseason and you do Brewers baseball. So what is this looking like for you in these next couple months?
Yeah, well, I'll go into the bubble. The dates aren't firm just yet, but basically for the NBA playoffs, I'll be going in there. We're going to start broadcasting games July 30th. Will be opening night for TNT, then the restart for the NBA. And we're going to kind of work in shifts. I don't know the specific dates yet. I have an idea, but it's not released and it could change. So I don't want to give it to you here, but basically all of the announcer groupings. So me, Kevin Harlan, Ian Eagle, Spiro Ditas, and then we have a number of play-by-play guys that are available who call games regularly on their own networks for their teams, depending on if their teams make the playoffs or not. So there's a stable of announcers that we will have too. So there'll be plenty of coverage, and then we'll kind of work in shifts. We'll be I don't think they want anybody there longer than probably 6 weeks. So, they'll just kind of mix and match. The whole thing runs 10 weeks, so they'll mix and match how long you're there. So I'll definitely be coming home to do Brewers games. I'll be going into the bubble in Orlando to call NBA playoff games. Our situation as broadcasters, as play-by-play announcers in the NBA, is a little different than the players and the reporters. So all of our reporters, like Allie LaForce and Chris Haynes and Kristen Ledlow, they're on a different level of access. So they're basically in the player protocol. So they would have to quarantine for 10 days. And then they can totally function, interview players, be in that wheel. We're not as strict because we'll never interact with players. We'll run all that through our reporters. So we'll be in the yellow zone, as I mentioned, and we'll be broadcasting the game from site, but it'll be up. Won't be courtside. It'll be up in the very expensive seats, and so be no fans. So we'll probably be 40 rows up, never coming down to the floor. So, and our hotel will be very similar, where we're separate. The TV crews are separate from the player bubble. Therefore, we can get in and out with just a 2-day quarantine, a negative test and a 2-day quarantine. So That's a lot of details for you, but that's basically how they're going to try to run it and keep the players safe and try to keep them as little contact with unnecessary personnel from their perspective to play the games as possible.
No, that makes sense. And I was curious because there's a lot of, like you said, you're doing Brewers road games from Miller Park. So I was curious if they're going to have like all these NBA announcers in their homes. But it sounds like everybody's going to go to Orlando, including, the local TV as well, maybe, or do they not know that?
No, the local TV will call it from studio. We call them the RSNs, the regional sports networks. Yeah. So Turner and ESPN will basically be providing the coverage.
Okay.
The cameras, the replays, everything from site. Turner and ESPN are responsible for. So we have production crews. There'll be 3 arenas. I think only 2 of the arenas we actually have our crews. They're going to have cameras at the 3rd arena is what I understand. But we'll never call a game from the 3rd arena that's available. And all those arenas are right there close to each other.
Sure.
And, one of them's just almost like a small gym, practice gym. One of them's a little bit bigger and would feel probably more like a high school type gym. And then the arena is a smaller arena feel. So that's the idea. And then all the RSNs will be in their own studios, or maybe, I don't know where the Bucks are going to set up, maybe Fiserv Forum, or maybe they'll go into the studio in Brookfield, the Fox Wisconsin studio, wherever they're going to do it. They'll just receive the feed, and then they'll call the game off the monitor. So a little bit different in the NBA than Major League Baseball, where we'll actually be at the arena or at the stadium for the home games at least.
Right, exactly. Brian Anderson joining us. He is the play-by-play announcer for the Milwaukee Brewers on Fox Sports Wisconsin and also for Turner Sports. I'm curious as well, like, how are you feeling about all of this? Obviously you'll be, announcing with no fans. You'll be announcing road games from Miller Park, and then you're going to be going into the Orlando bubble. So how is this sitting, with you with all these changes and adapting and everything like that?
Yeah, I feel okay about it. I have been lucky this time at home. I've spent a lot of time researching. My next door neighbor actually is the head of infectious disease at 4 Milwaukee hospitals, and he's a really good friend of mine. We play golf together, and I've been learning a lot from him, and I've been beating him up with questions. So I'm not. I understand the virus and its contagious nature and why it's so serious. At the same time, I do feel like there are pretty simple protocols in place to try to keep yourself safe. I mean, really, it always boils down to wearing a mask and washing your hands and staying 6 feet apart at least. I don't understand why this has become such a political issue, but it's really not. It's simple. If you don't want to get coronavirus, then just wear a mask. I mean, it's really that simple. He deals with the most difficult virus cases in the state of Wisconsin, and he has not gotten the virus, and he wears a mask every day and his PPE when he's in with some of the worst cases. So to me, it's pretty simple, and we'll be wearing masks. We'll have, we'll be constantly washing hands, keeping distance. They're putting up glass panels between the announcers. So I'm completely confident in what the NBA, what MLB has done. There are going to be positive tests. I would say, like, my mission, and I'll challenge you with this too, Hunter, the mission moving forward is to win, because this is going to happen. We already saw it with Rudy Gobert in March. But this public shaming, if somebody tests positive, and this now bounce effect that, well, this guy tested positive, he must have given it to us. I'm seeing it in the college ranks. My daughter's at Marquette. That was a hot spot for coronavirus positive test. And it's just, it's asinine. This virus is all over us. You can't pinpoint one person who's giving you the virus and then infecting everybody else. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, there are people who aren't getting the virus that are totally exposed and without a mask. And there are people getting it. I think they're starting to realize it's attaching to a certain blood type. Blood type O seems to be the one that is clear. Like I'm blood type O, so I've been tested 5 times, and I've been around people who have tested positive, and I've been negative. So there's just a lot to learn, and we don't know so much, and so it's just important as we get this thing started. I'm more concerned about that aspect of it, the shaming, the public backlash aspect of it, than the actual virus. And I'll give you a real life example. We already saw it with Rudy Gobert, but let's say Giannis Antetokounmpo tests positive. And let's say some reporter or somebody in the camp says, well, Kyle Korver's wife tested positive and she must have given it to Giannis, and now he's out, and now the Bucks aren't going to win the NBA championship, right? You can see how nonsensical this would be, but how this could be a real story. And I'm worried about that because we already saw it with Rudy Gobert, and he did some really dumb things that he's apologized for, but you can't say that Rudy Gobert infected the whole Utah Jazz team and ruined the NBA season. You just can't say that. It was coming. There were so many positive tests. And so I'm more this is my public service announcement to you and your audience, but I'm more concerned about that than the actual virus, is the long answer to all of this.
No, yeah, I like that perspective, and I think that's very important to hear. I think that you're right. We don't know everything about it, and we can't exactly, you can't exactly trace. And the public shaming part, and especially with social media, we know that that can happen. And so I really appreciate that perspective. I am curious, how has your preparation been over these last couple months as you kind of prepare for baseball and basketball to come back? And now we're going to be going into a season where baseball is going to be coming down the stretch. The NBA is going to be in the postseason. So, and you're preparing for both. So how has that preparation aspect been like for you as a play-by-play announcer?
Well, I mean, it doesn't really change for me. I mean, obviously there was a stop down, I probably went. I feel like I'm always reading and always keeping up on the news. There was a long window there of a couple of months, let's say, or 6 weeks, whatever it was, where the news was only about the virus and only about the restart and the season. So, after a while, it's just not interesting to me. It's nothing I would even use on the air. So once they set a date and, the players union and the owners worked out the deal, that was kind of a starter date for me with baseball. And then the NBA had set their schedule and their plan a couple of weeks prior to that. So really, once that started, I'm right back into my perpetual prep, reading stories about players. Now that the Brewers are back, there's Zoom interviews every day with our reporters, and I'm on those. And so that's it. It feels no different for me than any other moment of my schedule. The difference is there are no games yet. So a lot of this stuff is, I've got 10 pages. I don't have it with me or I'd show you, but I've got 10 pages of notes that I've just been keeping tabs on the Brewers, and then another 10 or 12 pages on NBA teams just to make sure that I'm caught up and my brain is thinking linearly that this is where we left off. This is what's happening now. Remember these trades. And like I was going through the Lakers and, they had made a number of changes at the end. They added Markieff Morris to the mix. And so Avery Bradley's not going to participate.
Right.
So those little things that I just want to make sure that I'm lined up with the news of what was going on before the shutdown, the news, what's happened since. And then, once we get to the games and I know my teams, then I can always add that into my board or my game prep. So constantly reading, perpetual prep is what I call it. And that's where we're at.
Sure. No, I that makes sense. So I am wondering, speaking of, sports coming back and the Brewers obviously being your main team, I'm curious what you think about the Brewers. Obviously, it's going to be a 60-game season, and the way Craig Counsell has managed, these past couple of years, I think has been, very, preparing unknowingly for this kind of season, the way he manages a day-to-day ball club. So I'm curious to know your thoughts. Do you think this 60-game season is advantageous to the team? Are they at a disadvantage? What do you think of this, how the Brewers will shake out in a 60-game season?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you're in a 60-game set, it's not a sprint. I think Council had a good word for it. It's not a marathon. It's more like a 10K maybe. But you're going to run games differently because it is 60 games. I think you're going to be able to push pitchers more, not in the beginning, because you still your tendency is the one to push the pitchers and have them pitch 3 out of 4 days or 4 out of 5 days. You know, if you're talking about a Josh Hader type, but you have to be disciplined enough. You can't do that because you will lose them. Then you always have to deal with the positive test, and if you have a number of players test positive, and so that's a new layer to think about for those guys. But I don't know who it's going to help or hurt. What I will say is, typically in a baseball season, if you take any 60-game window, even teams that lose 90 games or maybe even 100 games, you could still take a 60-game window where they were pretty good. And so it's going to be like that. It's going to be who gets hot and who can sustain that. And there will be a trade deadline. So if they can add to their roster, I know a lot of teams are going to be wanting to dump salaries if they can, if they don't feel like they're in it. That's why I thought expanded playoffs was a great idea. And I'm disappointed that they didn't come to an agreement.
Agreed.
The owners did with the players, because I think the expanded playoffs would have kept a lot more teams in the picture and would have created some real excitement. So definitely going to be an asterisk season, but at the same time, I think a 60-game season is going to be a nice, tidy window to be entertained every night. And inside the game, the 3-batter minimum with the pitchers, the runner starting at second base for extra innings. I think it's going to feel totally different. No crowd in the stands. We're going to be calling games, with no fans. But I do think if the players are going to compete at a very high level and take it seriously, which I think they will, they're going to compete, forget about the fans not being in the stands, and really compete to a level that we love to watch, then I think it's going to be fascinating. I mean, I am really excited to see how all of this unfolds in baseball and basketball.
Yes, completely agree. Me too. And to have them both going on at the same time, and then possibly even the NFL, is going to be a wild next couple months if this all does pan out. Well, Brian, I really appreciate the time this morning. I know you got a busy schedule, and so I absolutely love your work, and I've always loved it watching the Brewers growing up and everything. So I really appreciate the time today.
My pleasure, Hunter. Good to be with you, man. Good luck in your career. You sound great.
Well, thank you so much. That is Brian Anderson, Milwaukee Brewers play-by-play announcer on Fox Sports Wisconsin, and also play-by-play announcer for Turner Sports on TBS, TNT, and NBA TV. And he covers, obviously, MLB, NBA, and college basketball for them, including March Madness and whatnot. So absolute pleasure to talk to Brian as someone who looks up to him as a fellow play-by-play announcer. I was super excited when he agreed to do that interview and absolutely loved talking to him. And he gave us some great details, didn't he, about going to the Orlando bubble. He feels comfortable. They're going to be calling Milwaukee Brewer road games from Miller Park. So they're going to be doing that with screens set up. I just thought all those details were fascinating, and I bet you did too as a sports fan. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember, you can watch or listen any episode you can watch on YouTube or listen on SoundCloud. Just search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. You can feel free to subscribe as well. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. And feel free to like the Facebook page as well. Hunter Baumgardt Sports is the Facebook page. One final thing, I want to thank everyone for their kind words about my new gig with SB Nation Radio. I was hired to fill in on their coast-to-coast national network, occasionally, and so I started last Sunday, and I appreciate all the kind words on social media from everyone, and I'm super excited. I had a blast doing my first show, and we'll do another one coming up on Sunday from 10 to noon, so I'm excited to keep going with SB Nation Radio. Once again, thanks so much for watching this episode. Thanks to Brian Anderson for joining me in a fantastic interview from him. Can't wait. Sports are coming back. We're less than 3 weeks away. Well, less than 2 weeks away, actually, now from the start of the MLB season. So can't wait. Hey, and as always, stay positive.